Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes football webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Wall-Jesper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, Missouri gets its first SEC victory Saturday. They beat Kentucky. The interesting development in that game is James Franklin does not start. We'd been told that he was doubtful and basically was not going to play. Then, after Corbin Bergstresser struggles mightily for the first three quarters, they bring James Franklin in. The explanation, I guess, was that he was cleared to play but was so limited physically that the game plan would have been shortened up so much for him that they didn't want to play him, but then it got to the point where they decided they needed to play him.
Right.
Just your thoughts on that decision and what went into it and what it meant?
I was surprised by it just going off of Gary Pinkel's track record. He's never taken a quarterback out of a game that was still competitive for any reason other than an injury. But this is a season unlike really any other at Missouri as far as that position goes. So the track record is probably not as relevant when you're dealing with new situations. And the fact that Missouri was up at that point, the defense was playing so well, Kentucky didn't really seem like a threat to. I mean, all it took was one play to get back in the game, but just the way that the game was unfolding at that point, it did seem unnecessary that Bergstresser was even throwing those deep passes at that point when the running game was working pretty well. But it did seem it worked out because the whole offense just kind of settled down once Franklin came in, and he does play with a lot more poise. Sometimes that's to a fault, I think. But this day, he came in and they got some first downs. They were getting first downs with Bergstresser, but everything seemed to be a little bit more effortless when he came in there. The problem with Bergstresser sometimes he just seems so jumpy and jittery back there, and passes that shouldn't be that hard to complete are really hard to complete. And it worked out for Pinkel, but it was kind of a strange call. If he's not healthy enough to start, why is he healthy enough to come in? But then we did see that the game plan was pretty conservative. He didn't do a whole lot out there except sort of just manage the offense.
Yeah, other than just the sort of maybe some sort of psychological lift of him playing, he really basically just handed it off every time, which Bergstresser could have also done. I just thought maybe it was more of that they kind of came on a little bit there at the end was more they finally started calling running plays instead of passing plays, which, I don't know why they weren't doing that all along. But I guess going forward then, what does he think it means? First of all, for Bergstresser, as a guy that's played, probably bits and pieces of 4 or 5 games, seems like he's had the best success early on in the season and then has kind of really tailed off these last few. Problems for him as far as, what we think of him as possibly being the future quarterback? I mean, is that being rethunk, you think?
I think so. I mean, he really hasn't shown anything in this body of work to think he's a long-term answer at that position. And people talk about his really strong arm. I really haven't seen it. I mean, I don't think it's really strong enough to where you think it could, be harnessed into a weapon. I mean, he's thrown some ducks up there. And he wasn't, I've written this a lot, he wasn't very accurate in preseason camp. He was the least accurate of the 3 quarterbacks. He's the least accurate quarterback in the SEC. So there's not a whole lot there that you can say, well, at least you're seeing this, and he can be the guy down the road either next year or after Franklin. And, when Franklin is healthy, and he wasn't even healthy the other night, he just does give them such a better chance. And whether it's running or throwing. I don't know if he'll ever be much of a runner in this league like he was in the Big 12, but he is a much more accurate passer, and that counts for something for sure.
And then with Franklin, do you think going in this Florida game, they're acting like, well, we think he'll be 100% healthy? I kind of have my questions that one week he could just be so immobile and finally he's going to be fine against Florida. How does that affect what they're going to do against Florida, you think? Do they have the same, quarterback run plays that they would otherwise?
I don't see it either. I mean, on Monday he was talking about how he still hadn't, fully bent his leg, and he hadn't, tried even to run full speed yet, and he's not the fastest guy in the world anyway. So maybe some of that is just to kind of give the impression that they're back to being their full offense and that their full playbook is in play at Florida, and then maybe they'll, kind of look more like they did in the second half against Kentucky when he came in there. And Florida's defense is good enough to sort of, make them kind of dictate the flow of that game anyway. And, teams don't run on Florida very well. No one really has in their home games. South Carolina and Georgia are pretty good running teams, and they couldn't run at all against Florida. So Missouri's in for a pretty big challenge defensively in that game.
Okay, well, tune in tomorrow when we will discuss kind of what strategy Missouri takes at this point going forward for the season.